right. So get ready to go back into Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. We're going deep into chapters 19 through 21.
Oh, yes.
And
Picking up.
yeah, picking up where we left off, and the story takes a pretty interesting turn.
It does.
It takes us on this like kind of whirlwind tour of England and Scotland,
Right?
but with this like underlying sinister twist, you know?
Always.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so we've got Victor. Remember, he's on the run,
Right.
haunted by this monstrous creation.
Of course. And
This promise that he made to create a companion.
yes.
And it's fascinating how Shelley uses this like picturesque journey to like reflect Victor's inner turmoil.
Yeah, it's really interesting how she uses the landscape
Yeah.
to reflect what's going on internally.
Yeah.
You know, and that idea of nature mirroring human emotion was a big deal in
It
romanticism.
really was.
And it's really on full display here.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. But
Yeah.
you're right. I mean, we've got Victor's friend Henry, right?
Right.
Who's like totally captivated by everything they see. The Windsor Forest, Oxford, those stunning Scottish Highlands. He's just loving it all.
He's like a tourist in his own country.
He is country.
Yeah.
And then you've got Victor, who's like drowning in despair.
Exactly. It's like two completely opposite reactions to the same landscape.
Yeah, and it's almost as if the landscape itself is echoing Victor's emotional state.
Right.
You know, he starts out in these grand Norris, bustling cities, and then as his dread like intensifies,
Yeah.
we end up in the desolate Orkney Islands.
Right.
So the scenery becomes like barren as his spirit.
Exactly.
But this journey isn't just like sightseeing, right? It's almost like Victor is searching for something.
Yeah.
Some sort of historical parallel to his own internal struggle.
I think that's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about the scenery.
Yeah.
He's actively engaging
Yes.
with the history of the places they visit.
Yeah. What do you make of his like fascination with figures like Charles I when they visit Oxford?
Well, I think you've hit on something really important there.
Okay.
The Oxford section, I think, is crucial.
Okay.
Because it really emphasizes how deeply Victor yearns for peace and happiness.
Yeah.
Remember how he compares himself to a blasted tree?
Oh, yeah.
He sees himself as permanently scarred,
Right.
unable to experience those divine ideas of liberty and self-sacrifice
Right.
that he admires in these historical figures.
Wow.
So it's almost like he's foreshadowing his own tragic fate.
That's really interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
the comparison to a blasted tree goes beyond just like a fleeting thought, right?
Right.
I mean, Shelley's deliberately using it to hint at the destruction that awaits a Victor.
Exactly.
I mean, it's like she's planting a seed of unease in the reader's mind.
Right?
And that unease just like grows
Yes.
as they travel north through the Lake District.
Yeah.
And even though Victor's surrounded by the kind of beauty that reminds him of his beloved Switzerland,
Yeah.
he can't escape the fear that's gnawing at him.
Nope.
He's like a prisoner of his
Yes.
own creation, isn't he?
He is a prisoner.
Constantly looking over his shoulder, waiting for those letters.
Right.
Terrified for his family back in Geneva.
Yes.
And that fear is so palpable in his descriptions of himself.
It really is.
Like, remember when he calls himself a restless specter?
Oh, yeah.
That's such a powerful image.
It is.
He's haunted.
You can't escape it.
He can't find peace, even in these beautiful landscapes.
Even surrounded by beauty.
Yeah, and this constant anxiety, this feeling of being hunted, it leads him to make a decision that might be one of his biggest mistakes.
Oh, absolutely.
You're talking about a decision to separate from Henry, right?
I am.
And head to the remote Orkney Island.
That's exactly right.
It's almost as though he believes that isolating himself will somehow protect his friend.
Right. And it's also tied to his belief that
Yeah.
this will allow him to finally
Yeah.
fulfill that drugful obligation to the monster
Right.
to create a companion.
Yeah, and the description of the Orkney Islands,
Oh, it's so weak.
it is so stark.
So unforgiving.
Yeah, it's like he's descending into a personal hell.
Yeah.
A fitting setting for this monstrous task that he's about to undertake.
It is a very deliberate choice of setting.
Yeah, but even as he starts, like, gathering his instruments and preparing for this gruesome work,
Yeah.
doubt creeps in.
Of course.
He's wrestling with the morality of his actions.
Absolutely.
Terrified of the potential consequences.
Right.
So this is where we see a real shift, I think, in Victor's moral development.
Yeah.
He's no longer blinded by ambition.
He's seeing clearly now.
He's finally confronting the horrific potential of his creations.
Yes.
The possibility of a whole race of devils being unleashed upon the world.
Right?
It's a chilling thought.
It's terrifying.
And then In like this moment of pure dramatic tension, the monster appears
Oh, God.
at Victor's window,
At the window.
demanding his companion.
Oh, yeah.
That scene with the moonlight, the monster's ghastly grin twisting into fury
Oh, yeah.
as Victor destroys the unfinished creature.
Right.
It's incredible.
Such a powerful scene.
Yeah, so this is a turning point, right?
Definitely.
Victor defies the monster, breaks his promise.
Yes, he does.
And the consequences are immediate.
Right away.
I will be with you on your wedding night.
That's chilling.
Yeah.
It's a direct threat.
It seals Victor's fate.
Absolutely.
He knows it's a death sentence, but perhaps also a chance to finally complete and destroy his creation.
Yeah, he has to act now.
It seems like every step Victor takes,
Yeah.
every decision he makes,
Uh-huh.
just leads him closer to disaster.
Closer and closer.
But before we can even process that chilling threat,
Right.
tragedy strikes again.
It does.
And this time it hits very close to home.
The murder of Henry Clerval.
Yes.
That's where we'll pick
And
up
that's where we'll pick up.
in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, so stay tuned.
Stay with us.
We're going to be right back.
Right back after the break.
Okay, so we left off with Henry Clerval murdered.
Right.
And that chilling threat from the monster.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's amazing how Shelley weaves together this like gothic horror
Yeah.
with these like profound questions about responsibility
Yeah.
and the consequences of our actions.
Absolutely.
And the way she uses dramatic irony to heighten the suspense
Oh, brilliant.
is masterful.
Yeah.
Here we have Victor,
Yeah.
already burdened by guilt over creating the monster,
Right.
now falsely accused of a crime he didn't commit.
Exactly.
It adds another layer of tragedy to his already desperate situation.
Oh, absolutely. And it really makes you think about
Yeah.
the idea of justice and
Yeah.
whether it's always served.
Well, the evidence against him is entirely circumstantial, right?
It is.
The timing, the boat, the witness testimonies. It's enough to convince the authorities, but we as readers know the truth.
We do. We have that insider knowledge.
Right, and that knowledge creates this incredible tension.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, we're watching a Victor spiral deeper into despair,
Yeah.
wrongly accused,
Mm-hmm.
and completely unable to defend himself because of the secrets he's carrying.
Right. It's like he's being punished,
Yeah.
even though he didn't commit this particular crime.
Yeah, and then while imprisoned,
Yeah.
he receives that heartbreaking letter from Elizabeth.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's a reminder of the love and innocence that Victor has destroyed through his actions.
Yeah, that letter is so powerful.
Yeah.
Because it reveals Elizabeth's deep empathy
Yeah.
and intuition.
Yeah.
She senses Victor's inner turmoil,
Right.
his distance.
Mm-hmm.
She even questions whether he truly desires their marriage.
Right.
But she also expresses her unwavering love and support.
It's almost as if she's offering him a way out, right?
It seems that way.
A chance to confess his secrets and seek redemption.
Yeah, like a lifeline.
Yeah, but Victor, trapped by his fear and guilt,
Yeah.
remains silent.
He just can't bring himself to tell her.
Yeah. He's convinced that revealing the truth about the monster will only put Elizabeth and his family in a greater danger.
Right, he thinks he's protecting them.
He thinks his silence is the only way to protect them.
But it's a tragic miscalculation.
It really is, because even in his silence,
Yeah.
he's still drawn back to the monster's promise.
Right.
He decides to marry Elizabeth,
Yeah.
believing it will either protect her by hastening his own death,
Yeah.
or force the monster to reveal himself.
Oh, he's making a dangerous gamble.
He is. It's a decision driven by desperation
Yeah.
and a misguided sense of duty.
He's playing right into the monster's hands.
And the way Shelley describes their journey to Lake Geneva,
Oh, it's beautiful.
it's breathtaking.
So idyllic.
The mountains, the flowers, the setting sun.
Yeah, it's like a dream.
It's all so beautiful, yet tinged with this overwhelming sense of foreboding.
Right, there's this darkness lurking beneath the surface.
Yeah, remember how Victor describes the mountains as an insurmountable barrier?
Yeah, it's like he feels trapped,
He's surrounded by beauty,
Yeah.
but feels utterly trapped.
unable to escape his fate.
And even Elizabeth, who's trying so hard to be cheerful,
Mm-hmm.
mentions a sinister voice whispering doubts.
Yeah, she senses something's wrong.
It's like she has a premonition of the impending tragedy.
She's not completely oblivious to the danger.
No, she's not. Then they finally arrive at Evian.
Okay.
And as Victor steps ashore,
Yeah.
he utters that heart-stopping line.
Oh, yeah.
Those were the last moments of my life during which I enjoyed the feeling of happiness.
It's like a punch to the gut.
It is.
Knowing what's about to happen.
It's clear that Victor knows something terrible is about to happen.
Oh, he's on edge.
He arms himself with pistols and a dagger,
Wow.
determined to protect Elizabeth at all costs.
But he's up against a cunning adversary.
He is, but the monster is cutting, isn't he?
Oh, absolutely.
He knows how to exploit Victor's fears and expectations.
Exactly. Instead of a direct confrontation,
Yeah.
which Victor is anticipating,
Right.
the monster targets Elizabeth.
Oh, God.
striking at the very heart of Victor's remaining hope and happiness.
Yeah, and Shelley doesn't hold back in describing the brutality of the murder.
No, she doesn't.
It's a horrific scene.
It's really hard to read.
Made even more devastating by the contrast
Yeah.
between the beauty of their surroundings and the violence of the act.
Right. Some critics argue that this scene
Yeah.
is deliberately graphic,
Yeah.
meant to shock the reader,
Yeah.
and force us to confront the true horror of Victor's creation.
I think there's definitely an element of shock value, but
Yeah.
it goes beyond that.
Right.
By describing Elizabeth's death
Yeah.
with such stark realism,
Yeah.
Shelley emphasizes the irreversible consequences of Victor's actions.
Right. It's not just a monster story.
No, it's not.
It's about the potential for human actions to unleash unimaginable evil.
And that's something that becomes even more apparent in the aftermath.
Right.
Victor, driven to the brink of madness by grief and guilt,
Yeah.
is now the prime suspect in her death.
Oh, the irony.
It's a cruel twist of fate.
It is. He's innocent of this particular crime,
Right.
yet he's being punished for the sins of his past.
And this sets the stage for the final confrontation
It does.
between Victor and his creation.
Victor and the monster.
But will Victor be able to overcome his grief and despair to finally seek justice for all those he's lost?
That's the question.
That's the question.
We'll find out in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we left Victor
Oh, wow.
completely shattered,
Yeah.
falsely accused
Right.
of Elizabeth's murder.
I mean, it's like he's trapped in a nightmare
It is.
of his own making.
So where does the story go from here?
Well, it seems like he's reached like the absolute lowest point.
Yeah.
I mean, he just collapses
Yeah.
under the ward of his grief and guilt,
Yeah.
falls into a delirious fever.
So it's almost as though his body and mind just can't process
Right.
the magnitude of his suffering.
Yeah, and it's interesting how Shelley uses this like physical illness
Yeah.
to reflect his inner turmoil.
Right.
You know, his fever becomes this symbol of the chaos and destruction he's unleashed.
Right. I see what you're saying. It's like his body is mirroring
Yeah,
the monstrous creation he brought into the world.
exactly.
And meanwhile,
Yeah.
the authorities are building their case against him.
Right, they're gathering evidence
Mhm.
that seems to solidify his guilt.
So his solitary journey on the lake,
Right.
which he intended as a way to protect Elizabeth,
Ironically,
now works against him.
he has
No alibi
no
for the time of her death.
And
his delirious wranglings about a monster and his own culpability just make him seem more suspicious.
absolutely.
He's caught in this terrible paradox.
He is.
His attempts to protect his loved ones have ultimately led to their destruction.
Yeah.
And now his own guilt prevents him from speaking the truth.
It's heartbreaking.
It really
Yeah.
is. But just when all hope seems lost,
Yeah.
a glimmer of light appears.
Okay.
His father,
Yes.
who has been desperately searching for him,
Uh-huh.
arrives
Yeah.
and is immediately allowed to visit.
Okay.
And this reunion
Yeah.
is both poignant and incredibly frustrating.
Oh, I bet.
Victor tries to confess,
Okay.
to unburden himself to his father, but his words are incoherent.
Of course.
The ravings of a man
Yeah.
consumed by grief and guilt.
Right.
I can only imagine how difficult it must be for his father to witness this.
Oh, yeah.
To see his son, once so full of promise, now broken and delirious.
Yeah, it highlights the profound isolation Victor experiences.
He does.
You know, he's carrying this terrible secret,
Yeah.
unable to share his burden.
And even when presented with an opportunity to confess,
Yeah.
he's met with disbelief and incomprehension.
Right, because who would believe such a story?
So he remains silent,
Yeah.
his guilt and despair only intensifying as he recovers from his illness.
Right.
What happens when he realizes the full weight of his situation?
Well, despite the charges against him,
Yeah.
despite the loss and devastation,
Yeah.
a spark of defiance ignites.
Okay.
Within Victor, he recognizes that he has a duty
Okay.
to protect his remaining loved ones
Mm-hmm.
and to prevent the monster from claiming any more victims.
So even though he's physically and emotionally drained, he decides to fight back.
That's pretty remarkable.
It is, considering everything he's been through.
It speaks to the resilience of the human spirit.
He insists on returning to Geneva,
Oh,
much to his father's concern.
of course.
He's determined to confront his creation
Wow.
and bring an end to the monster's reign of terror.
So he's taking matters into his own hands.
Oh, what about the trial?
Right.
Does he ever clear his name?
Incredibly, yes.
Wow.
It turns out that his solitary voyage on the lake,
Yeah.
the very thing that seemed to incriminate him,
Right.
provides an inadvertent alibi.
Wow.
So the grand jury dismisses the charges against him.
So legally he's exonerated, but is there any real sense of relief?
That's a good question.
Can he ever truly escape the shadow of his actions?
That's a question that really lingers
Yeah,
throughout the rest of the novel.
it does.
Even though he's free from legal prosecution,
Right.
Victor remains a prisoner
Yeah.
of his guilt and the knowledge that he alone is responsible for the deaths of William, Justine Henry, and now Elizabeth.
This deep dive has taken us through like a whirlwind of emotions.
It has.
The horror of creation,
Mm-hmm.
the weight of responsibility,
Yeah.
the devastating consequences of unchecked ambition.
It's a cautionary tale,
It is.
reminding us that even the most brilliant minds
Yeah.
can be blinded by their own desires,
Yeah.
leading to unimaginable suffering.
Victor's story is a reminder
It is.
that our actions have consequences.
They do.
And that even with the best intentions,
Right.
we can sometimes create monsters.
We have to be careful what we create
Yeah.
and the power we wield.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
into Frankenstein.
It has.
See you next time.
See you later.